if the church decides that now there's errors in the Bible, well, it doesn't even matter what error they're talking about. Once they've decided that, it's a slippery slope to everything in culture being embraced and everything in Scripture being denied.
Hey, Scott, an ode is a formal, often ceremonious lyric poem that addresses and often celebrates a person, place, thing, or idea.
Okay.
I'm going to read to you a stanza from an ode.
Okay.
You tell me to whom or what is the ode dedicated.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Wow.
Here it is. Here it is.
He gives me hard things. The spontaneous, hard questions. Every question we're going to have after this is going to be easier than
compared to this one. Yeah, okay. Here's the ode. You are the poet's looking glass, the storyteller's tongue. History written in your dark blood, culture in your pigment stains, revolution in your indentations, change in the shifting of your weight. That is an ode to...
Hang on, let me think. Either the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, those are very good guesses. However, not right.
Okay.
This is an ode to the fountain pen.
Ah, wonderful. There it is. Okay.
We got a little peek behind the curtain on Sunday.
Yes.
That you have a hobbyette.
Yes.
Fountain pen collector.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That is a fountain pen collector and senior pastor of East White Oak Bible Church, Scott Burkle. My name is Treg Whitaker, and this is the Ask Scott podcast. Of course, Sunday you were preaching from 2 Corinthians chapter 3.
That's right.
And we read Paul talking about an unusual ink and an extraordinary letter.
Yes.
And it has sparked some questions.
Wonderful.
Shall we dive in?
Let's go.
All right, here we go. Paul says that the Corinthians are his credentials, if you will, letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
That he really didn't need a commendation.
Right.
Are credentials important when hiring church pastoral staff? Like seminary degrees or ordinations? Or is it simply sufficient for them to have letters of commendation being changed lives?
Yeah, as a result of the person's ministry. Yeah. Well, in an ideal world, the answer would be that we wouldn't need those things that we typically ask for. And the reason is because you would be raising up leaders in your own local church to take on various ministerial responsibilities in such a way that everybody would already know. They'd say, well, yeah, this guy, right? But in circumstances where you have not been rubbing shoulders with someone for years together, then of course having some kind of way of accessing the way in which they have done the work of the ministry is extremely helpful at getting to a better picture of the person. Yeah.
Is church pastoral staffing more corporate now than it would have been in the first century, where pastors are kind of raised up from among the congregation? And is that a good change or a bad change?
Yeah. I would say it's a change.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. What I would guess that in some circumstances it's good, in some circumstances it's bad. What I think is that typically people tend to look outside their immediate reach more commonly maybe than they should, but that's kind of the nature of our culture.
Yeah.
You know, the expert is someone who's at least 25 miles away from us.
It carries a briefcase.
Yeah.
Right. Paul was suggesting that his commendation or his credentials were the Corinthians themselves. What actually was an authenticator of his apostolic ministry was the changed lives.
Yes.
At other places in the scriptures, I think we're pointed to the apostles signs and gifts,
Oh,
miracles maybe,
Right.
as an authenticator of the apostolic ministry of the
Yes.
person. So
Yes.
which is it? Signs and miracles are authenticator, or changed lives are the authenticator?
So a key word here is apostolic ministry. So to identify an apostle, I would say that there were signs and wonders that accompanied that, which is why, by the way, today that many in the signs and wonders movement will have an office in their church of apostle, because they see clearly that that's how that works in the Bible, and in order to be consistent in their theological perspective, they would say that there needs to be apostles today. But I would say that for ordinary ministry, okay, that we're talking about here in 2 Corinthians 3, I don't think that there needs to be signs and wonders that accompany that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than the miracle of the new birth, which
Yeah.
let's say it's better than what happened at Sinai.
Yeah. You suggested that evidence that you are being used by God is changed lives.
Yeah.
Is it possible for someone to be used by God without such evidence? I'm thinking of missionaries who've been in a
Sure.
mission field for decades maybe,
Yeah.
and really nothing to point to in terms of conversions. Are they being used by God, or are
Sure.
they not being?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. So understand that the one doesn't preclude the other. We should, when we see changed lives, recognize that that is an authentication of ministry. The lack of changed lives doesn't mean that you aren't ministering. So, for example, a missionary may spend their whole life, their entire career, planting seed. And there are actually stories like this. The next guy that comes, the missionary dies, another guy comes, and he goes, "Anybody want to love Jesus?" And the whole group becomes Christians. And it wasn't because that guy was so effective and the prior guy was so ineffective. It was that that person had planted and cultivated for many decades.
Yeah. Paul is pointing to the Corinthian congregation as kind of his, well, the words that he uses is a letter of recommendation, his credentials, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that they're really the poster child for congregations. Wasn't the Corinthian church a mess?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
why would he have suggested that they're sort of his credential?
This is actually something that I thought about putting into the message, and I wasn't. It may still end up in another message here in 2 Corinthians. That in Christian service, sometimes we think everything that we're doing is so small and paltry, and we look at other people and they aren't growing like they should, and there's so many, steps backward for every step forward, etc., etc. And what I want to suggest is that we should consider what they were like before they became a Christian and what they would be like had they kept on not being a Christian. And there, if you look at the city of Corinth and the Corinthian church, you would see something that is to boast about, in the Lord, right? Now, obviously, if you're going to look at it in terms of the absolute perfections of what the church should look like, the Corinthians get maybe a C minus, a D plus, somewhere in there, right? Yeah.
The theme that is running through your sermon series on 2 Corinthians has to do with serving.
Yes.
And one of the things that you talked about on Sunday was there are occasions where people don't feel well served by their church, so they bolt.
Yeah.
They are church hoppers until they find that they're no longer being served at the next place, and then they hop to the next place, and they hop to the next place.
Yeah, and another idea that I brought up is that people will pick from a menu. They'll do one thing at one church and then like another thing at another church and so forth. Sure.
Yeah. Church hopping, not good. But on the occasion where somebody moves to a new geographic location, and there's a certain amount of church shopping
Yes.
that needs to happen.
Yeah.
That's probably a
totally great.
Yeah.
And I would add another thing. When a church changes, so for example, if a church changes its beliefs, decides that it's going to, I don't know, embrace all kinds of things that the world embraces related to sexual morality, you know. I think a person is certainly in a good place to move from that. Number one issue would be the authority of Scripture.
Yeah.
If the church decides that now there's errors in the Bible, well, it doesn't even matter what error they're talking about. Once they've decided that, it's a slippery slope to everything in culture being embraced and everything in Scripture being denied. That seems to be whatever popular of the day is going to be. Yeah.
We're so happy when people submit questions by texting
Sure.
Ask Scott to 77411. This one was submitted this week. You mentioned on Sunday that some study revealed that most Americans, their top two priorities are to be rich and to be thin.
Yeah.
The question today is, if you replace those two words with the words successful and healthy,
Yeah.
are those more worthy priorities?
No. I think they're synonyms. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't seek to be rich or successful. I mean, rich is just successful in money.
Yeah.
Success can be defined in a number of ways, right? But the pursuit of success, when we aren't pursuing God as our first priority, no other gods. What is number one commandment? You shall have no other gods before me. The same way with our thing about thin. Healthy is another good word for that. I mean, I don't mean to describe that a person has to be thin in order to be healthy, but it's a related subject having to do with our physical bodies, right? And we should try to make our physical bodies be able to last as long as they can in order for us to be able to serve the Lord as long as we can, right? And no one would be wrong to fail to try to do the best for their body, but it can be an obsession that gets in the way of serving the Lord. And when it becomes an obsession, that's where it runs afoul of the first commandment. Yeah.
Another question submitted by one of our podcast listeners. We had the privilege of observing communion on Sunday. And this question is about communion.
Great.
During communion, does anything miraculous happen, or is it purely symbolic?
Yeah. So, two key words in that question. Anything miraculous and purely symbolic. And Christians have debated this question for centuries, right? Let me take the poles and give that kind of direction. One end of things would say that the cup, the bread and the cup become literally the body and blood of Christ. Okay, that's one pole. The other pole on this question would be that it is only symbolic, and there is actually nothing really of any spiritual import other than our own memory or thinking of the symbol. Okay? Now, if you were going to press me to either end of that spectrum, I would be on the symbol. I would say almost completely symbolic. I don't want to eliminate, however, the idea that as we partake in the Lord's table together, there isn't something particularly special about it. I don't want to call it miraculous. I don't want to call it something of the substance of Christ's body. I just simply want to say that there's a mystery aspect to that Jesus instituted when he instituted the Lord's Supper. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Ask Scott podcast. If you found the podcast today interesting or helpful, it would be an encouragement to us if you would push the like and subscribe buttons. You can find past episodes of the Ask Scott podcast by searching at East White Oak on our YouTube channel. You can also follow East White Oak Bible Church on Facebook and Instagram. We look forward to you joining us the next time Pastor Scott answers your questions about the Bible on the Ask Scott podcast.